Welcome. I am Michele Leclaire, Executive Director of Buckham Gallery. Today, I am chatting with Emmett Merrill about his exhibition, Empty Road, Great Tornado, on view through January 7th. This exhibition may also be viewed on our website at buckhamgallery.org. Merrill's work uses the lithographic process to create narrative prints which combine Americana imagery with that of myth and legend. The prints deal with the emptiness of the American landscape, the devoration of ghost stories and local legends, objects of art history, and the culture surrounding the highway system. Excuse me. The work also explores how time can move within a single visual space, similar to the way hieroglyphs exist as a contained image but can be read in the same fashion as words on a page. Objects and foliage appear scattered along the ground in the works, as if the tornado has whipped through a gas station on a history museum and all the artifacts landed together in the same field. Before we join the conversation, I would like to say thank you to our incredible audience, whether visiting the gallery in person or viewing these videos online, and to all the artists who submit to our exhibition calls. I appreciate you. Next, I would like to say a big thank you to the individuals and organizations who support Buckham Fine Arts Project and Gallery, including the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, the Michigan Arts and Culture Council, and the National Endowment for the Arts. The Greater Flint Arts Council Share Art Genesee Grant Program, made possible by the Genesee County Arts, Education, and Cultural Enrichment Funds, your tax dollars at work. Thank you. Emmett Merrill is an independent artist printmaker hailing from Kansas City, Missouri. His work uses lithography to explore topics including ghost stories, the American highway system, and art history. He is a collaborator with the Artist Collective and Fine Art Print Shop Graphic House, where he self-publishes his work. Merrill received his BFA in printmaking from the Kansas City Art Institute and his MFA from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. His work is included in numerous public and private collections in the US and internationally, most notably the Library of Congress and the China Printmaking Museum. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk to Emmett today, and I think you're gonna love it too. Okay, here we go.
Welcome, Emmett. I absolutely love your work, and I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you and learn a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to thank you for having me. The show looks so good. I wish I could have made it to see it in person, but it looks awesome. And thank you for having me. It's great
Yeah.
to talk to you.
Oh, you're welcome. We love the work, and just having it here to share with our Flint audience is really it's important and special. It's been really great. So yeah. So I like to start these conversations really to learn a little bit more about you. So what's your background, maybe where you're from, and really what led you to the path of art making.
Oh, well, so I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. And my parents are both artists, and my dad's a printmaker. And for a little while in high school, I lived with him in his studio, which is in the basement of this warehouse, and it was on this dead end street. And it was great because nothing was around it. I'd overlooked the train tracks, and on the left of us was an abandoned Bible college, and on the right was the Belger Crane Yard Studios in Kansas City, where the Lawrence Lithography printmaking workshop was.
Wow.
And so every month there'd be a little opening there, and all of the work coming out of Lawrence Litho that was printed by Michael Sims was it was narrative, it was figurative, it was brightly colored, but it had all of this depth. It was kind of like some Johnny Cash songs where like they're like sad or violent or about heavy subjects, but are kind of sung fun or whatever. They're all printed in primary colors and whatnot. And it was work by artists like Luis Jimenez and Elizabeth Layton, Tom Huck, and all these phenomenal artists. So I was seeing that all the time. And then I'd go back and go back to my dad's studio, and he would stay up all night drinking wine and drawing. And even if he wasn't working on his larger artwork, he would sit with this stack of 8.5 by 11 paper and just take a pen, watch Criterion Collection movies, and just draw and put it aside and draw and put it aside. and he would just go through stacks of these drawings. And I think just being in that environment and seeing art making as something that's a lifestyle and is a actual career path that can exist, it just was always natural for me to fall in.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, wow. So I imagine your family, your dad was very supportive when you chose to, or almost expected you to follow in the artist's footsteps.
I like to think so. Yeah, I think it was like, oh, he's into it. I'm not going to force it, but he's into it.
Uh-huh.
And so I stayed in Kansas City, and I went to the Kansas City Art Institute, and then I moved to St. Louis to be a press assistant for Tom Huck, the Midwestern printmaker. He did all these insane graphic narrative woodcuts that are really intricately carved, but they're of folk stories and hillbilly legends, and a lot of them are really gnarly about his hometown in Potosi. So I was helping him print all of his work. Well, that was the nice side. The other side, I was also like washing windows and taking out the trash and all of
Yeah.
that. But on good days, I was helping him print his work, and we would travel to all these printmaking events and artist fairs. We went to New York and Texas and all over. And then I worked for him for 3 years, and then I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I got my MFA in printmaking. And it was wild because I finished in March of 2020, and I finished my thesis show and I hung it all up in this gallery. And it was the week that everything shut down and nobody saw it. And I had all this work up, I put it up, and then I went home, and they were talking about shutting stage down, and I freaked out and I ran back to the studio, the gallery space, and took all the work down, put it in my car, and drove back to St. Louis, where I've been ever since.
Oh, wow.
And it ended up being a bit fortuitous because around that time I was afraid that I'd never make lithos again. Where was I going to have access? Were we all going to die in this pandemic? It was really scary. But my close friend JT Felix had already started a print shop called Graphic House, and it was just screen print at that time. And we had both worked for Tom Huck, who had a storefront print shop. And he came to us and was like, listen, I'm done doing the public thing. I just want to have my own studio at home. He grandfathered the lease down to JT and I. And over the next year in 2020, I moved my press up from Kansas City. We got a litho press. We found all of these litho stones, which is its own insane story. They were in a hole somewhere in Ohio. And JT designed the entire layout of the studio space, and we just spent a year building it, and we've been trying to keep our noses above water ever since. And that's where we're at now. That's like almost 3 years later in a couple days.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that's really amazing and kind of interesting. I find printmaking is wonderful because it has that studio environment, a shop, where people are sharing, equipment and presses and especially stones and in many cases. And then especially, and if you're doing it in college, and then when you leave college, there is that bit of a scramble. It's like, well, how am I going to continue to make prints? I went to school in Philadelphia, and we had a great litho set up with the stones, on the shelves, and I just love that. But once I left school, I would continue, and I did a lot of actually intaglio too, but moved on to woodcut and just different relief printing, just because I didn't have the access there, and then eventually into painting. And I think that happens to some printmakers. So that really great that you had some access nearby.
Definitely. And
Relationships, yeah, like that.
it's like it lucks out. I feel like it seems it's so difficult to imagine getting all this stuff when you're in school and when you get right out, and then like you start realizing that it kind of comes to you or watching like Facebook Marketplace, and all of a sudden something insane pops up and you're like, oh my God, it's an etching press. We just have to get it out of a dumpster in like wherever. But we had like, I was in the kitchen. It was like June of 2020, I think. And my partner Samantha, she was on Facebook Marketplace, and she found this ad from this place in Newark, Ohio. This couple was digging up their backyard to put in this koi pond, and they found a swimming pool size hole full of lithostones that got buried in the 1940s. I think in 1943, they said. And this kind, I guess, a commercial lithography company went out of business, and they didn't know what to do with the stones, but they didn't want to destroy them, so they buried them and didn't tell anyone for some reason. And so this couple finds them, and they sent out a message, and we were like, "Hey, anybody who wants them, we'll sell them for $20 a stone, as many as you can carry. Just get here, or else on Monday we're going to take them to a landfill." So we got in the car, drove like 9 hours, like out to Newark, Ohio. And the funny thing about Newark is that when you're driving out there, you turn this corner and there's this giant building that's shaped like a basket. It's enormous, and it's totally abandoned. And I think it used to be for a basket company,
Yeah.
but the cost of it's insane. Anyway, you had to drive past this basket and then find this house. And there were like 15 or 20 other printmakers there, and we all got together and like pulled these stones out of this hole and drove them back. So it's wild because it's like, I don't know, like you were saying, like woodcut's so accessible and it's nice you can do it anywhere. And intaglio, I think, kind of the same. I guess as long as you're not using the acid baths.
Yeah.
But like, I guess maybe not. I don't know. But like with litho, it's like such a drag because it's like you need all this stuff, and then to be like, man, like there's just not enough stones in the world that you can just go find them. So like, I think for us, we felt like it was like this is like meant to be. It was so cool. We got these things, and I don't know. And there's history to it too. I think like it's cool to have like stones that you're printing off of that the last time they were printed was in like 1939. You feel like you're kind of in league with all these other people that used it. And then these stones are going to live a lot longer than we are, and they're going to go down to the next printmaker. I don't know, it's kind of rad in like a traditional way.
Yeah, you're kind of part of a continuum.
Yeah.
It was
Like,
really nice.
this whole chain of things that you don't, yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, and the stones just have like a life to themselves. I don't know. I just always enjoyed like just the whole process of like cleaning and then they just, I don't, the smell. I don't.
The smell
I'm
is
gonna get really nerdy about this because I haven't done litho in years, but
I totally get what you mean though. The smell of gum arabic is so good. It's like sweet barbecue sauce. I don't understand it.
yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, we'll talk more about litho in a moment.
Oh yeah.
So here we have a little installation view, which you can also see behind me. So I love the title, Empty Road, Great Tornado. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how it relates to this body of work.
Oh yeah. Well, the idea of the tornado, it comes from a few different places. But it started with the idea of looking at the work, and when I was making all these images, it was combining things from my everyday life, which would be printmaking, things that were mundane, like cups of coffee, a glass of wine, a gas tank or fuel, whatever, and images from art history. And so the idea was that the images would kind of look like a tornado whipped through town and hit an art museum, gift shop, a Love's gas station, and someone's garage, and it all lands in the same field. And that's kind of what the prints look like. But that idea and thought process kind of started because I was driving a lot between Chicago, or more specifically DeKalb, Illinois, and Knoxville, which was like a 9-hour drive. And I was driving back really late one night, and it felt like I had this black cloud that was in the distance that seemed to be following me the entire time. And it was hailing, and then it would stop, and then it would get eerily quiet. And even as the sky got darker and darker and darker, this black cloud would make the night sky look blue. It was so ominous, and it followed me for hours. And finally, I get around to Nashville, and it's the worst and it's horrifying. And I get through and I get into the mountains nearby Knoxville, and it's fine. I get home and I go to sleep. Well, the next morning I wake up and I put on NPR, and it turned out I was driving through the night that all those tornadoes came in and hit Nashville a few years ago.
Oh my,
And I missed it by like 2 hours.
I'm
And
actually following you.
it was like this huge ghostly thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I drove back about a month later, and the you could still see the damage, and it was horrible because these tornadoes had destroyed people's neighborhoods and homes. It had taken semi trucks and ripped them in half. Trees were blown everywhere, and you could see the destruction right on the highway where I was driving back through. And I made this print about it, actually, tornado, because I think what was so horrifying about it, besides destruction, I guess in my experience of it, was the idea that you had this kind of presence of death in this big dark cloud. And my little like 2004 Jetta was never going to like fight nature or survive, you know, this tornado. And so I think the idea of all of these objects or all of these things that get scattered and moved around the tornado um, start to create new relationships where they can be a little poetic. Like you would have a Toulouse-Lautrec drawing next to like a bottle of Pepto-Bismol, and then the question narratively is, well, what does that mean? Oh, it kind of doesn't mean anything. It's like Bob Dylan poetry. It's just association or interesting images that can be funny or weird. But it was also about these sort of like grand feats of nature interacting with our domestic space, you know? And so this print was about that drive from Nashville. Somebody in their bathroom getting ready in the morning, putting on makeup, when all of a sudden a flock of geese burst in through the window. And this is that moment of contact. So it's kind of the whole show and the work in the show has those sort of relating themes, I think, of objects mixed together with presence of death and domestic spaces, things that are really grand and insane, and things that are boring and everyday.
Mhm.
So that's where the title came from.
Right. So you have these different like transition spaces, but then you have domestic areas and it's all kind of blending together. And let me see, maybe if I pull it up, we have like interiors, but also some of the inside stuff outside. I don't know. I lost it. I really had lost it.
That was a huge thing that started with COVID because I was making these drawings, and people, you know, you spend so much time inside in 2020 that you start drawing things that are in interior spaces. But I've always loved Art Nouveau and artists like Aubrey Beardsley, where you have, they're obviously inside sometimes, but they're still surrounded by all of these floral patterns and flowers and ribbons and things that are kind of making the composition move around. So there is that. I was always interested in that mixing of like interior, exterior space, and the idea of putting things in just for the sake of the flow of the image. It's nice to just have flowers. It's almost like, I guess it's a letterpress term, but like the dingbats, where it's like, okay, there's a space here. You need to fill it with something that just sort of ties the image together, even if it doesn't make sense narratively or directly narratively.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting also with you mentioning 2020, the pandemic, and these influences. That's, well, everybody started moving outside and setting up, like they're bringing their furniture outside and have to spend time not cooped in the house when they could, or even safely socializing with people. There was a lot of that moving of the inside to the outside also.
Didn't even think that's such a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but you're right. And it's, did you have that experience like when you would drive through town? Like, 'cause I saw it happen in St. Louis a lot, where people would like pull up their truck in front of someone's house, and they'd have like lawn chairs and sit in it and like be having a beer and kind of yelling across a yard to someone sitting on a porch. Yeah, it's cool to see like your living room or your bar turn into someone's front lawn, but you have
Yeah.
all the accoutrements, you know.
Yeah, people were bringing like kitchen tables and chairs, like more comfortable furniture if they didn't have like the folding chairs or whatever, and people were visiting, or even, gosh, we saw a lot of like drive-by birthday parties. and things where you'd have the kid out on the driveway with their balloon and something, and people would come by and say hi and then scoot along. I don't,
I love it's like a parade for this one
Yeah.
person.
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. No, yeah. I think merging interior exterior stuff is awesome.
When did you get into ghost stories, or what is your interest in ghost stories, and how did you get into them?
Oh, well, I guess at the start. So I was doing some research on folklore, which is something I think I've always kind of followed. And I found this book written by, I think his name is William Montell, and he was a folklore professor at the University in Kentucky, and he had published this book in Knoxville that was a collection of ghost stories called Ghosts Along the Cumberland. But most ghost stories tend to have a moral or a reason that you're telling it. And these were just an oral collection of stories that they would find by this guy would go out with all of his graduate students from like the late 70s to the early 90s. And they would go and meet people that just lived in rural areas along the Cumberland and ask questions and find, these ghost stories that their families had told or they had experienced or heard. And they were phenomenal because they were stories like, they were almost like non sequiturs because these aren't meant to have any greater meaning. They were just like, this is something that happened and I can't explain it. Like one of them, if I remember right, was about this guy who was working on this cattle farm, and he goes up this hill, and across the valley, he sees this cow that he could have sworn he put down the week before. So he gets spooked and he runs back down the hill, brings up his fellow workers or his family or whatever, and brings them into this pasture. And he's like, look, that cow, I swear I put that cow down last week. And they all look around and the cow's gone. And that's the end of the story. And so he's like, it was a ghost cow. And so I was reading these and they would just end abruptly like that. And I was like, that's really interesting. The idea that you have this experience with something that you could swear was a ghost, or you could swear was like something larger than yourself and a relationship to death, but you don't know what it means. It's too big. But it makes for a strange narrative. And so I started making these drawings because that's how I felt my narratives would go. They would have this story, but it would kind of come to this end. It was just something that happened. And as I was working through and doing this, I realized what was interesting about telling these ghost stories was that the ghost in a sheet is this sort of catch-all metaphor where draw a ghost in a sheet. It looks, one, hokey, it's kind of funny, especially if you can draw it with like mismatched socks or something, or doing like a funny pose. And then if you draw it right with its kind of beady eyes, it can be really scary, and it's somebody concealing themselves in the narrative, and so you don't know what they look like, what their intentions are. But at the very heart of it, it's also really sad because you think about loss and grief, and the idea that you have somebody that's following somebody who's living still around because they miss them, or because they just want to be there, or because maybe it's the person in the image's own grief that's following them. So it was a new way to start to play with narrative and play with a symbol to start to tell these stories that could be, one, like a ghost cow, a little bit funny, or two, a little bit spooky, but really at the end of it, sort of telling sad stories through a lens of like bright colors and something that might look funny at first.
That's interesting because your images do all have that mix. I mean, they seem a little, well, they seem kind of playful and silly in some of the combinations of things because of bringing these disparate items together. But they do also have that sadness, sort of maybe definitely inherently in there. That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, specifically the Kalijah, the one behind you with the deer that's jumping through a field.
Let me pull that up.
Oh yeah, well the idea was that you had two cutout advertisements sitting in a like rural Illinois gas station. One of them is a cowboy that's advertising for Ham's beer. The other one is advertising at like little bar called Marie's Old Town Tavern. And these two inanimate object signs are in love with each other, and they're set across a gas station, but they can never be together because they're separated by aisles of motor oil and Cheetos and Red Bulls and gas station snacks and stuff. Until one day a tornado hits the gas station and lifts these two cutout signs together and lands them together in the same field where they can finally kind of interact and be together. So it's this ridiculous love story between two inanimate object signs that has a kind of a happy ending. So it can be, the idea was that it's this sort of doomed love story that's a little sad, a little funny, and a little bit like, what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah. Do you sketch out the stories before you start creating your images?
Oh, I think it happens at the same time. I think it's, I don't play any music at all, so I can't really say this except for other what I've heard in other people's interviews. But it's kind of like, I think musicians a lot of times tend to write the lyrics at the same time as they write the music, and that's sort of how I feel like I best describe the narratives in my prints, because I think I'll start with the idea of an interesting image, and then go through and try to figure out how to make a foil to that image or a narrative relationship to it. So the idea of like the wooden cowboy that's leaned up against and propped up in a field, its advertisements all fallen off. It's like that in itself was an image that I had and thought about for a while, but then it was like, what? It's almost like a character. What? How does it exist in this context, larger than itself? And how do I build a narrative around that? So it involves a lot of drawing something out and then going to sleep and then coming back to the studio in the morning and being like, oh no, that doesn't work, and then erasing that whole thing. And then I don't know, it's almost like a collage where you're like putting something together, living with it for a while, and then like, actually no, I'm going to take this part out and try something else.
Yeah, well, that relates actually directly to one of the other questions I have, so I'll skip right there. Because litho, of course, lending itself to drawing, and the question I had prepared was whether you started directly on the stone or if you draw your images out on paper. So are you composing them on paper before going to stone? Because paintings, you think, a lot of artists talk about developing their story because the paint, they can move it around on the canvas or panel or whatever their substrate is. With litho, with the grease, I mean, it's hard to move your images a lot, I would imagine, once you start on the stone, or maybe I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's better lithographers than I am who could figure that out. But for me, I always start on paper, and I would get the like heavy French paper because I like will erase so much,
Yeah.
which like I think is a symptom of not being immediately great at drawing. So having to be like, oh, okay, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. I have to sort of, it feels like sculpting, get the things together. And then I just have, I don't know, being able to carry it around. And then whenever it gets, by the time it gets to the stone, I've drawn it several times. And then I go to redraw. And that's when I can put on an audiobook and just zone out. And it's almost just like, all right, translate that once more with feeling kind of thing.
Yeah.
But these days I've kind of started, because I'll have varied ideas, and I've started drawing on clear vellum so that I can cut out an image and then put it next to each other. I feel like I have this collection of like clip art or something, like a tattoo flash sheet where it's like, oh wait, I've got this image of somebody wearing a mask like this. Let me put them here. Does this work well with the deer standing next to like a bush? No, and kind of, I don't know, move it around. It's like a bunch of little short stories, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great way to work.
Yeah,
It is.
just in an impulsive, yeah.
Yeah, and then but you make new relationships because when you're moving them around, you're seeing if they talk or communicate, or maybe they need a third person or object or something. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that, I don't know, it's like I don't know. I think that it's really difficult to start from nothing. I think having a studio narrative is one of the most important things because a lot of times I never, it's hard to feel like going to the studio and drawing, but it's more, but you can have days where you're like, I want to go to the studio and I've already got these drawings. Like, how do I sort of put them together? It's like you're always working from something instead of coming in and being like, oh shit, I don't have any ideas. This sucks.
Yeah.
It's like we're always being able to work from a previous drawing or like a half idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
That felt like rambling in my head. But yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And otherwise you need to have like rules, like I only do this sort of thing. So you have some guidelines, because if it's just wide open, you're just like, well, where do you even start?
Yeah, exactly. It's like too big.
Couple images or whatever to work with, or have to go, ah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you have to like draw yourself into a corner because it's like, oh, okay, I drew this thing in this part of the paper. I can't move it. Like, how do I fix this? Yeah.
Well, okay, so about the printmaking process a little bit. Printmaking is in general, very process oriented, or can be, of a media, and lithography especially. And I think of like all the printmaking processes, litho tends to be not only have all the steps of an involved process, but then there's a bit of magic that takes place, a little alchemy when you have to, set with your acid onto the stone to get the grease to set, and you have to get the right amount. I don't know. I never made it to where I could mix up my own solutions to paint over the grease. I didn't make it that far. I had a great litho teacher who would sit there and help me with it to make sure it cut balanced and print. But it was always, he would look at it, and I don't know, I feel like there was even like considerations for the atmosphere, how much humidity we had on that day. There was just like so much. And I don't want to talk about it. I would love for you to talk about a little bit about the process of lithography.
I love that side of it. And like I was so intimidated by etching too, because I had a professor like that who was great. And we would like do the drawing and be etching it. I'd run to him and be like, how many drops do you do for this? And he'd like look at it and be like, 4. And you'd go back and do it. And then he'd come back the next day with a new drawing and he'd be like, 3. And it was like 1 drop difference. But what was I saying? Oh, but yeah, no, I think that the alchemy side I think it's one of the most interesting parts of it. I remember because it's almost like, I think especially a lot of printmaking feels like chemistry or science being practiced by people that don't know chemistry or science. But they know if they follow these instructions, you get the thing, or they know cause and effect, but not necessarily like why. It's like you got the like book of witchcraft, which I guess in this case would be the Tamarind, and you're like, okay, I'm following these steps. I don't understand why, but if I do this, it will work, But I remember Catherine Polk, who is probably the best lithographer around today. She came as a visiting artist when I was a grad student, and she did this drawing on a stone and brought it out. And my memory serves me, and I hope it does because I've been going around telling people this story. Before she etched it, she called a friend and had her friend recite a certain ritual or chant or phrase or prayer on speakerphone that she held over the stone before she etched it. And I don't think anyone was really around. I think there were just other people working. And you look over and she's got this thing and she's holding over her stone. And she makes like 100 lithographs a year. So she must have to call this friend all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like someone who knows that much about lithography and the process and the science and the chemistry behind it still calls this person to do that. It's like, you're not dealing with just any kind of science. I think that's where like the art and the magic and mysticism comes from it. And I think, like I was saying earlier, what's so cool about it is that, yeah, like these stones were around before us. They're going to be ideally around after us and get sort of passed down through generations. I mean, you're just kind of borrowing these rocks to make prints off of.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. It's got this lineage just a lot longer than we are. And then you have the idea of like etching, which is like totally intuitive at the end of the day. So if you go and talk to Richard Peterson in Visalia, California, he has all these crazy things that he's come up with, like counter etching stones with lemons, and he's using a certain amount of lemon. And if you read his book on it, he like his measurement is something like a lemon and a half from the grocery store mixed with like a cup of water, but you don't know what size lemons he's using. uh, so I don't know. There's something really interesting about that, and the people that are into it are like dedicated for life. It's like a cult,
Mhm.
and everyone has those little tricks, and I think that that's almost makes it separate from every other print practice because it's so finicky and lends itself to ritual because you can do everything right and follow every instruction in the Tamarind, and then for some reason you get to printing and something starts going wrong, and in those moments of desperation you're like, it's not any of the process I was doing wrong. I should have eaten toast for breakfast. I had toast last time I made a great edition. I should have had toast. I had cereal this morning. I totally messed up.
I'm wearing the wrong shirt.
Yeah, I know. It's like I need the right. This is a good printing shirt. I can't wear the bad printing shirt today. That's my editioning shirt.
Yes. I love it. It's great. My litho teacher, Ron Weifels, he was just always so quiet and thoughtful and would like that, would just tell you the drops and everything. But also found was interesting, he made flies for like fly fishing. And I heard that's something lots of lithographers do. They make their own flies and enjoy fly fishing. So I just had to ask.
Actually, this is ringing a bell. I don't want to speculate names because this is being recorded, but I feel like I've heard of somebody else doing this who's a master printer lithographer. It
Yeah.
seems like a thing. And also, of course, like a lithographer would be into that. It's tedious, quiet, and a little bit visual. That's such a weird thing.
Because he had also talked about some of the others, and just like the quiet process of making your own flies. And then we found a book. I can't remember who it was, but it was a lithographer who actually did draw litho prints of the flies that he had made or they had made and had created this. And now I can't remember the name either, but I think I have a copy of it out.
I think that's what I'm thinking of. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, this is gonna drive me in. Will you email me the name when you find it? Because
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. And this is what I'm thinking of.
Mhm.
Also, like how printmakerly is that to like not only go through and be like, I'm gonna make these complicated flies and do the research on like the best ones to make to catch certain fish,
Mhm.
but then to bring them home and make drawings of them.
Yes. And put it together in a book.
Exactly. Hand bound.
Yes.
Because you'd also, I don't know, you'd also imagine that they started with like doing sketches of how they want the flies to look, then making the flies, and then drawing the flies. Man, printmaking's so dumb. It's like you go around, especially like in universities. Oh, but these print like students spend all this time drawing. They're drawing on newsprint, like a whole week, and then bring it in, trace it onto the stone, and then throw up or not throw up, throw away and crumple up their original drawing they spent a week on, and then draw the stone in a day. And you'll walk around, you'll see all these like super beautiful detailed drawings in the trash cans. And it's like, well, that's not the artwork. That's like the step to get it. It's so funny. I don't know. You spend the least amount of time with the print. It's weird.
Yeah, and then although you could do really cool things, I used to have some of the test prints that wouldn't turn out so well that I would then print over again or use for book binding and for bookmaking and stuff. Because you can, like, I guess that's not directly related, but
Oh no, I don't know. I think that
things that could be trashed, that could be saved. They should save the drawings.
I know. And the test prints look so cool. I always save the newsprint that has like the proofs and all the color that's all like misregistered. And they make great wrapping paper. Once a year, you can pull all this out and you can
Yeah.
drawings on these colorful like paper.
But that's a great idea.
It's
Yeah.
a good move.
Well, okay, I actually have a question. Someone had noticed Sorry, I should
Yeah.
just get the thing. And I'm guessing this has something to do with your registration for color. Right in this area. This
Oh
was
yeah.
noticed in a couple different prints, and I was asked about this, if it had a special meaning, and I thought it probably had something to do with the printing process, but if you would.
Oh yeah. Well, about a year ago, I got really interested in using or sort of scaling down and using primary colors like the CMYK colors as like the main thing in the prints, and then having a brown. But I think part of growing up in around print shops and printmaking was I was so fascinated by seeing all the test prints or the color experiment like overlays that artists would have, and then would cut up and throw away. And I was like, that's such a drag because they look so cool. And they reference the fact that it's a print, and they usually just get cut off of the finished piece. And I thought it was funny that I was using all of these primary colors, but I wasn't overlapping them at all to make um, secondary or tertiary colors. And so I was like, all right, well, I have to do that. It's somewhere in the print. So it started with just adding this extra thing and layering the colors and seeing what could happen, even though it was like a joke on myself. It wasn't happening in the actual image. And I don't know. I think I like making these things on the side because it tests the colors, it overlays them, and it kind of reminds you that it's a print, and it references the print. And instead of hiding away the testing and the experimenting, it brings it in and celebrates it, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great.
It was so in Kansas City. There's a letterpress shop called Hammer Press, and they used to run all these large editions, but they would run color tests that kind of looked like that, like a bunch of squares or drawdowns of overlapping colors, and they would go and throw them out. And a lot of times they would do them over misprints. And so my friends and I would go around back, and you'd go open up their dumpster, and they'd have piles of these beautiful misprints that had like there was one that was a big woodcut of mountain landscape, and they had just run all these color drawdowns over it, and it looked gorgeous. And yeah, so I try to, I think, bring what I thought was cool about those into the finished prints or into the work, and not shy away from it.
Well, I love that these are allowed to be print, and embracing the lithography and the print of it. Because I mean, I know in a lot of early lithography, it was to, make these drawings that they could use in like newspapers or publications or something, where it was just to look like a drawing. And here we are directly referencing the process of the print. I enjoy that.
It's cool. It's like I feel like a lot of like commercial or printmaking started with its commercial effect or it's trying to copy paintings or drawings for artists, and then once it became obsolete commercially, it's like you got the painter, I don't know, artists come in and like make that the art form or like the print for like the print's sake.
Yeah.
So cool. I mean, it like also gives access. Like you go and see a Toulouse-Lautrec print, you can see one anywhere from like Kansas City, Missouri to I don't know, a gallery museum in France.
Mm-hmm.
It's democratic.
Yeah, yeah. So in your bio, it says you self-publish at Graphic House. Do you mean that you are personally printing your own works, hand printing, or are you actually publishing them in collections or in books?
Oh, I am personally hand printing all of the work. Um, with Graphic House, it's artist collective and fine art print shop, and we're lucky because there's four artists currently that are working out of there, which would be myself, Samantha Mendoza, JT Felix, and Liz Hermanson, and we all kind of have our thing. Like JT is all screen prints, all lithography. Liz is all intaglio, and Sam is a Renaissance lady and does everything, but her main focus are large woodcuts. And so while the shop we'll publish work from other people, and we'll bring artists in and do workshops. Uh, I've got my litho press and my stones, and am constantly working out of there to publish my own work and make my own editions. Um, so yeah, so it hasn't gone into any books, but it gets collected and shown and moved around.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense that if the term is to publish the work. I just didn't ever think of it that way. I'm like, oh, printing editions, but that would be publishing the work and sending it out. That's really awesome also that at Graphic House you were able to have so many different medias, print medias happening in the one space.
Oh yeah, we lucked out. I mean, like, I don't know, we didn't plan it that way because we were all close friends anyway and making work. And then once we got everything built up, you start to see people working in different areas, and you're like, oh my God, everyone has their corner of the shop and their medium and I don't know. It was just really serendipitous in that way.
Yeah. So do you ever use other print medias with your work? You try someone else's, or I mean,
I really need to start. My interest in printmaking started with woodcut, and I loved the German expressionists, and I could just and I was really insecure with my drawing at the time. And the nice thing with woodcut was I could find ways to hide drawing mistakes or things that I wasn't good at by just having heavy shadow and heavy contrast. So it's like, I don't know how to draw that hand very well. Cool, that big shadow right there. Um, but then I got a little more confident as I went on, and started sticking with litho and keeping with, I think, that process, because I liked the translation of the drawing. I like that it looks like a print, but still has the essence of a sketchbook page or a drawing in a sketchbook. Um, I, I think that I work really consistently, but it's really hard to break me out of like patterns and cycles. So I'll just work the same way forever until some kind of thing comes in front of me and it's like, all right, nope, you can't do that anymore. Here's something new. I'm excited. I'm actually going next week to a Direct Angle Press in Bethlehem, Massachusetts, to start making risographs. So I'm going to bring a bunch of drawings up there and start figuring out how to, or spend a week up in the mountains or what have you, and start learning that. So I'm hoping that that'll be one of those posts that diverts and gets into a new medium. But I don't know. I think that I'm hooked for life on litho.
Yeah. Well, your work definitely, the litho suits it well, because different processes will have different effects. So you wouldn't be able to draw the same way with a woodcut, and it would have definitely a different feeling. I was just curious if you had ever tried to translate, but I couldn't imagine it. I was just curious what it would be.
Oh yeah,
It would have to be a totally different body of work, a different style.
I think so. I don't know. I think I almost get too lazy or like too anxious to like not. I don't know. I think that a lot of it is like you want to translate ideas or thoughts in a readable, interesting way, and it's like I feel like I figured out my way of doing that, and so I get so hesitant or like nervous about trying something new because I feel like I'm a slow learner, so I'd have to really do it over and over and over again to get it. And I don't know. I think yeah. Yeah, I should. I don't know. I should try some. I'm saying this. I'm like, man, if like I was a student, I'd be like, man, expand the horizons. Yeah, it always goes back and makes things better.
Yeah. Well, when you were a student, did you have to learn the different processes? Do a little bit of everything, or were you able to just concentrate on litho the whole time?
Well, in my undergrad we did a little bit of everything and got like a survey of all the major print media, and then I was only doing woodcuts and just like I am today with litho, would refuse to do anything else. And then I got into graduate school, and Beauvais Lyons practically forced me to start drawing on a stone. And he gave me a Deco Color paint pen and was like, all right, try drawing with this. It'll look like a woodcut. You'll be fine. Just do it. And I started working on a stone with it, and I was just hooked immediately. And then it's like being made to eat your vegetables, and then being like, oh my god, this is actually like way better. And I don't know. I also think that the direct process with drawing and litho would be intimidating because you wouldn't want to spend all this time because you grain the stone down, you make your drawing, and then draw with effort. You really want the thing to be good. And so for me, it was like giving myself the excuse to, or the permission, I guess, to not be good at drawing, but still do it with like some confidence or some chutzpah or enough to like tell an interesting story. And my friend Mary Climbs at that time had given me this book. It was a comic by Nick Dornasso called Sabrina. And in it, he was telling this really sad story. And it was drawn so simply and only with a few lines in each panel. And I was looking at that and was like, okay, if you can convey that kind of emotion with that simplistic of a drawing, like I can do the same thing. And so I went and I just spent a day making one drawing and I transferred it to the stone. And then it was like, oh, whoa, that worked. That's really interesting. And then I started printing color on it and had a big bold red on this BFK tan. It was like, oh my God, that looks cool. Like it is. I don't need, you know. And it was like this puzzle or like stair stepping until it was like, now I've done a whole lot of them, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find it's natural to stay with the simplistic drawing, or do you draw more and then have to bring it back before you transfer to stone?
Oh, I think I overdraw a lot, and then on a piece of like French paper, and it'll all look wrong and chaotic and be full of eraser marks and notes and everything. And then I'll put vellum over it to kind of make sense of the madness. And then I'll bring to the stone, flip the vellum on the other side, so you're transferring it on backwards, and then go through and then redraw it. And then once that full composition is there, uh, again, I love the idea of sketchbooks because they're so immediate. They, I think, are a way to like translate just things you don't even know you're thinking about when you're just mindlessly doodling. And so then once I have the composition on the stone, there's all this room on the inside or like on the folds that I can fill with whatever I'm thinking about and just sort of sketch something in. And then all of a sudden that becomes the coolest part of the drawing. It's like the larger composition and that's been drawn several times gives permission for impulsivity to happen on the stone when I'm working.
Oh, nice.
It's almost like if you draw something really good over here, you can draw something stupid or badly drawn over here. It's like the balance, like it gives you the permission or allows you to do it, you know?
Yeah. One of our, someone who was in the gallery a couple weeks ago, he's one of our one of our artists at the gallery, part of our collective, and he does a lot of screen printing and drawing, but was, of course, admiring your work and talking about how beautifully simple they are and how he can never stop himself because he has to just go in. He's like, oh, I need to add this detail and this detail, but he was just loving the simplicity and wondering if that was like hard to stop or if that was easy. So now we'll have an answer for Matthew.
Oh yeah, not at all. I love simple line drawings. I don't know, when you get the lines are in the right spot, they're so funny, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like, I don't know, like little kids when they're drawing stuff, it seems like they'll be like, all right, like shape, that's a tree. Cool, done. Move on to the next thing. It's like not about, it's like almost like telling the story. And so it's cool to be like, or try to do the same thing with my work. Cause I feel like the more I draw into it, the more incorrect it starts to look. So it's like letting the drawing get broken down into just a few lines because it does end up looking a bit like a sketchbook page. And then starting to use color to fill in the space in between that should be drawn to start to separate the images. So I think a lot of drawing does happen at the press bed or through the process. It's like you have your sketch and then you put it through the machine of yourself, redrawing it several times, and then the printing, and then you, I don't know, there's a quote in an Art Forum article that I read a long time ago that's like the space shuttle that takes off doesn't quite reflect the one that lands. I feel like there's a similar thing where it's like the start of the process or the started drawing always looks way different than the thing that it produces and comes out as. I feel like that's why, I don't know, that's what makes printmaking so cool. Yeah, you sort of are working the same image until it's something totally different than where you started.
Yeah, like it has its own life. It has and experiences that it develops over the time of being worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Carried through. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to throw you a curveball. This was something I always thought was fascinating to ask artists, but I haven't in a while. So we'll see how this goes. So, what is your earliest memory?
Ooh.
Curveball.
Oh my God. I keep thinking back and thinking back. I don't know. My earliest memory. Probably my house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, memories are weird because I feel like you have like certain glimpses like when you're young of like things, but you don't remember when it happened.
Mhm.
And I don't know, in all honesty, probably my living room in the house I grew up in. Not sure what I was doing in there.
So I ask because, and I'll share mine with you too.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I don't know why. So mine is actually, I have to preface it because I don't remember if it's my memory or not. It's something that I was told as a story multiple times from my mother. And so it has become part of my memory. So I'm not 100% sure it's a real memory or an influenced memory, but of being 2 years old when I had split my chin open, of being like put on at the hospital at the table and kind of being strapped down with a light overhead so that they could stitch my chin up. But I'm not sure if it's a real memory. I don't mean it to be sad. So, but but the point is, my paintings are largely about childhood memory and the influences, and I combine images from different places together and make new memories. And so they become these little stories that develop. And when I was in grad school, we were at a party, we were drinking beers at the bar or whatever, as we often did after a crit night or something. And someone went around and asked us our first memories. And it was crazy. And that was the story I had sort of given at the time, that each one's first memories seemed to relate to the body of work that they were working on for their thesis and where we have all continued to go. So I don't know, there was something about your work and the way you were talking about things earlier. I was like, I should ask the memory question. So living room kind of works. I was kind of imagining, objects in a space, and just being in a place, which your images definitely have a place about them, whether inside or out.
That's a good, actually, I mean, well, yeah, I think that's a big thing. I mean, like, even so, living room, like, when you looked at, like, my house, also, great thing about having artist parents, you have great stuff hanging around your house, objects they would collect from different, like, places, all these huge, like, paintings and prints and photographs. My mom is a photographer. And, man, yeah, now this is making sense. Then we had these weird sculptures that were all around, and actually I have one of them. They have stuff like this. They have these like weird, like,
oh
dragons,
wow,
and like
oh that's
I
great.
this was sitting in my house my entire life. It's kind of inappropriate, but then you like lift it up and there's this like horrifying like thing inside of it
That's awesome. Oh
that I
wow.
found. Like I found that out when I was like a lot older, and just sort of like these sort of things. And then we had this whole wall that was just full of like masks, and like the masks they collected from different countries, from friends who'd made them, from what have you. So I think just, yeah. So I think living room with that. I stick to that answer. Seeing all this stuff, it's like weird amalgamation of photographs and images and strange objects and masks and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that you guys are right about that. Sitting at the bar and like finding all of those connections.
Right, and because in your works you have a lot of different objects and the way they're kind of relating to each other and speak, and which may not have been expected to be found together. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, well, good.
Yeah, it's also weird that like I've heard instances of people telling stories like that, like you, and then having a sibling be like, "That wasn't you. That happened to me."
Oh yeah. That happens a lot too. But it was, what are, some of the major influences on your work currently? I mean, we've, having mentioned your parents and your childhood growing up, but are there any influences maybe now in what you're working on?
Oh, definitely. Well, right now, I've been looking really closely at uh, art work by David Hockney and Aubrey Beardsley,
Mhm.
just in the sense of having non-traditional compositions where it's almost like a bunch of objects that are put together. But if you like look at the like Aubrey Beardsley, for example, you'll have um, Salome kissing Saint John the Baptist's like severed head, and they're kind of floating in this like space, and then some flowers kind of come down, and there's just sort of these shapes, and it disappears in this sort of almost like abstracted pattern-based thing. Um, but it was part of the series that was for Oscar Wilde's rewriting of that story. And when you see all these drawings together in like sequence, you wouldn't have no idea really that they were related or that they told this story. And the same is true of David Hockney did a set of prints called A Rake's Progress, obviously based on the Hogarth suite.
Mhm.
But I think it's about his first time moving to New York. But he'll have a little drawing that he does of himself, but he won't draw his like full body. He'll be like a bust of himself, and it's kind of floating or like moving along like he's a Charlie Brown character. And I think what those both have in common is that they're taking these sort of like older themes of like these classic stories and seeing them through the lens of their contemporary time period, and also making works that are obviously about a narrative but aren't necessarily very directly connected. It's almost like the artist is the connecting thing between all these works. Um, so right now I'm working on a new set of prints. I'm finishing up the first one this week, and it's going to be larger prints that are going to look similar to these, but they're going to be 22 by 30 again, and they're all about loss and grief and how it sort of follows you around. My partner Sam told me this sort of myth, I guess, about the Corinthian shadow, where this guy is going off to war, but before he leaves, his kid or his family member or wife sets him in front of a candle, and his shadow is casted on the wall, and they go and they trace the outline of the shadow. And so when they leave, they still have that traced drawing of their silhouette on the wall.
Oh, wow.
And so that's going to be an overarching theme in the new body of work. So that story with these those two bodies of work by Aubrey Beardsley and Hockney have kind of been what I've been eating recently.
Yeah, I love that. I'll have to look up some of those, the Beardsley and Hockney also books. Wow, but I love that story with the shadow. Mm.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first one is I'm working on. I got a clothesline up, and then this sort of like silhouette standing behind it, and all these figures and objects moving around all around it, and this kind of a self-portrait of me drawing and a sidewalk chalk on the ground of a silhouette or a ghost. Oh, I don't know. It's kind of about how, especially with grief, how these things sort of follow you around or trail you, or you don't know if it's like a ghost or if it's just your memory, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. I have loved this. This has been really great, Emmett.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been so much fun to talk, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, oh, of course. And it's been fabulous having your work here in Flint and having everyone have the opportunity to come in and see it. And then we'll have this conversation to share out there in the wider online world. Yeah, well, thank you.
Of course.
Oh my gosh, I just want to say a big thank you to Emmett Merrill again. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Emmett, and I hope you enjoyed it too. It was really great. And yeah, anyways, thank you. Thank you also for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. All right, take care. Bye.